So welcome. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to see you here. I love that we're establishing like a group of regulars too. I think that's awesome. Before we get started, if I can mention a couple of upcoming programs. On Thursday night, we have a free lecture by Reverend Clyde Grubbs. It's called What Actually Happened in 1492. This is in collaboration with the Task Force Against Discrimination here in Marblehead, and in honor of the second annual Indigenous Peoples Day. So you can sign up for free to get the Zoom link on our website in the upcoming, the Indigenous Peoples Day and the upcoming Programs Day web pages. And then also, as much as you know, I hate to ask for money, we are approaching the annual appeal time. And so hopefully you've received your annual appeal in the mail. If you are able to help us, as you know, for a lot of nonprofits, it's been a rough year. We haven't been able to do everything that we wanted to as far as fundraising and such, but you all have been great supporters by taking part in our programming repeatedly, and we certainly appreciate that. And so keep your eye out, please, for the mailings and the emails coming your way. We appreciate anything that you're able to do for us. So this month's topic on our monthly Marblehead Memories meeting is nicknames and funny stories. And one of the first things I think Betty Hunt told me when I first met her, I don't know how we started talking about this, was that especially years ago, maybe less so now, almost everybody had a nickname, to the point where you might not actually know their real, say, first name. You would know them by their nickname. And that kind of intrigued me. And so I thought, since we're doing Marblehead Memories, we definitely should throw nicknames in somewhere that maybe we can sort of open the door to figuring out who some people were. Because I will say that there are lists around. David has one shared in the chat, and we can call up a couple of things here. And if anybody wants to share their screen, they can do that, where we have like the nickname, but not the person's name. So it really doesn't help us, now that some people have passed away or everything, identifying them. Also, it kind of leads into, some funny stories or some quirky things that you might have experienced or heard about in Marblehead. So anybody willing to kick us off and get us started? You can mute yourself, Jim.
You want me to read one at a time or just continue?
Yeah, why don't you read a few and see if we can, if anything is ringing a bell.
Birdie Birchmore. Couple teachers, Hairy Legs Copeland, Spitfire Henderson. They were from the middle school. Spinner Martin. His initials were RPM, so they developed a spinner. And I remember, I don't know who the individual was, but went up in the water tower opposite his window and painted in large letters "spinner" on the top of the water tower. Kat Sangren, Andy Sangren, of course, Bud Orn.
Oh, Bud wasn't his real name?
Who's that? Andy?
Bud?
Oh, Bud Orn, Donald, I think.
Oh.
Donald, yeah. Bud Orn, the barber, and with the Park and Rec Commission. Swervin Irvin Bridgeau. Pencil Woodfin. I had a nickname, Buddy. Then there was Spider Healy and Spider Cunningham. Mike Cunningham was in a rock and roll group I was in years ago, and lead guitarist there, Mark Johnson, was Zombie Johnson. Then a couple policemen, Augie Wolfgram, Peanut Powers, telephone employee, Dutchie McKay, Doney, Clarence Stone, Bucket Manning, Toot Cahoon. He graduated in my class. A couple Livingstons, Tex Livingston worked for the town. Liver Livingston, his son. Spike Bassett. A couple of Sumners, Tissue, Scotty, Scuba, Johnny, the older brother. Spike Macaulay, Hoppy, Dr. Hopkins, Stevie Schweitzer, they called him Nibbles, Tinker Carroll, Collie Williams, Skipper the Jipper Burgoyne used to have the ice cream delivery truck. Cupcake Cameron worked for the town. Mouse Phillips, Alan was his name. Weasel and One Eye Ware, Weasel Ware and One Eye Ware. Furpo Monahan, he was a fireman, Frankie. Ducky Stanley, Ducky Lameau, Junie Mullins, Secret Woodfin, Stevie Haynes, he got killed in that storm. They called him Leroy. Chief of Police, Buzzy Palmer, Sleepy Saunders, Bone Holman, Chicky Lloyd, Kerry McGee, Gabber Peabody, Goober Phillips, Nubbin Young, Shorty LeGros, he was a fireman. Chummy Frost, he was a custodian at Abbott Hall. Baldy Peterson, he was police officer over in Beverly, I believe. Shadow Lord, Frankie Lord. Brick Martin, Jumpin' Jack Sinclair, Plucker Prince, Pye Morris. He's the son of John Morris. He was a state police officer. Whale Gillis, Bobby Gillis. Oil Slick, Alan Cowhig. And Bunny Rogers. That completes it.
Wow.
58 of them.
That's amazing. So Jim, can you tell us, or anybody can jump in on this, I guess, with all these nicknames just that you have, how did it usually come to pass that you'd be assigned, if you will, a nickname? How did that happen?
I was always told that you didn't get to pick your nickname, and you didn't necessarily get to like your nickname.
You were assigned.
You were pretty much assigned a nickname.
Yeah, that's true. I was assigned Crowhead when I moved to Marblehead in 1944, and two brothers across the street, Chris and Eric Brown. Eric came up with the nickname. They experimented with things like Cruller, but Crowhead stuck in Eric's name, and he still refers to me by that name. Sometimes, in my experience, nicknames come from some ignominious incident that occurred in the past. An example would be Anchor Float Dixie, who was discovered to have an extra anchor in his dory. And someone asked, "Where'd you find that anchor?" And he said, "Well, I found it floating in the harbor." So that's where anchors come from. And I ought to point out while I'm here, there is two other books, Hardtop to Hollyhocks, which I did not put links to because they're copyrighted, and From Hollyhocks to Hot Top 2, Louise Martin Cutler contributed a chapter in each book on Marblehead nicknames. So those books are readily available in the library and elsewhere. You could check there.
That's great. Thank you. And we also have them at the museum if anybody wants to make an appointment to come by and browse through them. And I'll especially go look now that I know that the nicknames are in them. Absolutely. Any other stories about how people got their nicknames that you know about?
Well, I will follow up to one of the ones that Jim mentioned, Cupcake Cameron, which was John Cameron. I'm not sure how he got the name. He worked for the town, how he got the name Cupcake, but he was using the street sweeper after that, and he tipped it over, so they renamed him Turnover from Cupcake.
And there's also the story of Jumpin' Jack Sinclair, which someone, Scott Campbell, told me the background on this. That at a very young age, Jumpin' Jack was cast in a play at the Lyceum Theater, and it was having to do with the story of Pocahontas. And he was in a barrel, and he was scheduled to stick his head out and say something, and some person dressed in an Indian costume was to come with a tomahawk, and the guy in the Indian costume mistakenly hit the tomahawk into the barrel and hit Jack in the head, and he popped out of the barrel and ran off stage, not to be seen again in any theatrical. So that's how he got the nickname of Jumpin' Jack Sinclair.
Anybody else have ones they'd like to share? How about when did the custom of assigning nicknames, when did that start to fall out of favor? And are there people in town that still, I mean, David, you said you still kind of go by your nickname for people from when headers talk to you.
Yeah, Lauren, I'd like to address that because that's one of the things I've been thinking about with social history. I'm over 65, and up until very recently, you know, men that were my age would who didn't know my name would occasionally shout out, "Hey, Red." It seems as though a lot of the nicknames that are on this list are derived from a lot of physical attributes. Maybe Peanut was small, Baldy didn't have hair, different things like that. And additionally, you know, like social incidents that happened that was an inside joke with everybody. But I was also struck by when I was looking through the history, because I've been reading about the Women's Aid Society, how many of the same first and last names back in history were used over and over again. And so in a way, I almost think sometimes maybe some of these nicknames are to differentiate between two people that have the same name in town.
What does everybody think?
I know somebody mentioned Cruller. I think it was David. I know John Sylvester got that. Is Cruller Sylvester? From what I remember, it's, you know, you ended up doing something stupid and you ended up getting a nickname from it. I know Joey Sylvester is Seaworm. Doug Percy saw him play hockey. Was a member of the 77 team, which was a pretty good team. And he called him a worm the way he skated around the rink. And then him being a fisherman, he ended up Seaworm, and he's still Seaworm today. Oh, crap. I mean, it seemed like everybody at the police department, everybody at the fire department had a nickname. And it's funny that you talk about social history because I can't think of a woman with a nickname.
Oh, that's
I know my
Chicky Lloyd.
My cousin Bowdy Russell ended up with he's probably the most recently tagged with Moontide, just because he was down at the beach one day, you know, going on and on about the moontide and the height of the tide, and he ended up being Moontide Russell, and he asked for a nickname, and he was reminded that he didn't necessarily get to like it at the end of the day, but he was okay with it.
so it is still happening on occasion.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
And then, Jim, did you say there was a woman with a nickname?
Chicky Lloyd, I think I mentioned.
Yes. Okay, I didn't realize that was a woman. Okay.
Chicky.
I heard Spitfire Henderson mentioned. She was one of my teachers.
Oh yeah, and Hairy Legs Copeland.
Hairy Hairy legs. Oh, hairy legs. I didn't get that the first time. That's good. Jeez. So it wasn't completely unheard of for a woman to have a nickname, but it sounds like it was a slightly more rare occurrence. Is that safe to say or correct to say?
Pretty much, I would say, yeah.
Okay. I was going to follow up on something somebody said, but I forgot what it was.
One of the girls that I went to high school with back in the day was called Babe, and her name wasn't even a B name. I think she was like something very weird, like Wilhelmina or something. She was named after her grandmother, and it was such a horrible name. I think she was happy for anything.
Oh, I know what I was going to mention. Jim, in the list that you read off, I think I remember hearing a couple of the same nicknames. The first names, at least, were the same.
Yeah, Spider Healy, Mailman, Spider Cunningham. He was in my rock and roll group. Who was another one? Ducky Lameau and Ducky Stanley. Yeah.
So sometimes they had the same nickname, and they would have to be. You maybe just knew how to differentiate them in your conversation, who you were talking about.
Yeah.
Mm.
You mentioned Ducky Stanley. One time or another, my mother came in contact with Ducky, and he had remarried a woman who talked all the time, and this appealed to my mother, and thought they might make entertaining dinner guests. So they came over, and the woman did talk all the time, and Ducky, when he could get her word in edgewise, reminded us that he had once had a fried clam, small fried clam stand on Orange Street, approximately opposite to Stacy's Market at the corner of Orange and High Street in Washington. The other thing that I remember Ducky Stanley for was he consumed a lot of alcohol during the evening, and didn't say terribly much, but that's just a brief memory of Ducky Stanley.
Lauren?
Yeah, Bill, go ahead.
Hi. I have in front of me 5 pages of nicknames. I suppose you people have that also, of people that have been in Marblehead for all these years. But to Dan Dixie's comment that he didn't know where Cupcake Cameron came from, John Cameron was in my high school class, but his father was a baker and had a bakery shop down in Bank Square. And he worked there all the time, so the kids called him Cupcake. And of course, after he turned the sweeper over, they called him Turnover. That's to help Dan out.
That's great.
And we have Daffy, who's still in town, Jimmy Davenport, and he told me the story how, I mean, a lot of the nicknames came from your last name, and he was called Davy because of Davenport. And then when he was in high school, there was a fake fight set up between him and somebody else in the school. For some reason, they had to have this fight. But during the fight, Daffy got hurt. Something happened, and he kind of flipped out. So it ended up being a real fight. He beat the kid up, and when the fight was over, the kid got up and he goes, "You're not Davy, you're Daffy." And for 50 years, that nickname has stuck. But
Well, there's always the famous Dennis family. They had all kinds of things, but there was one person in the Dennis family that was called Pie Mouth Dennis. I have no history on that, but that's what they used to call him. And there was also many names that you don't want to put on public television. I worked down the wharf for a long time, and they came up with some crazy names, but you don't mention those.
Were those only mentioned in certain company?
I might add that there are some of those unmentionable nicknames in Louise Cutler's 2 books here about Marblehead nicknames. And beyond that, in my high school, there were derogatory nicknames for some of the lovely young ladies who attended school with us. None of those can be repeated here.
My grandfather used to work with Chummy Frost down at Abbott Hall years ago, and he used to love to smoke the pipe, and he did a couple pamphlets they sold down to Eaton's. He did a lot of poetry. I think he even has one of his poems on an old Spirit of '76 postcard relative to the painting.
Yeah, and Chummy was James. James Frost was Chummy.
Right. Now, is that Holly on here? Is that Bevins? What's Holly's last name?
Holly Williams.
Oh, Williams. Oh, I remember.
Holly, just a bit about Holly Williams. The last ferry boat to sail out of Marblehead Transportation Company was in September of '68. And Walter Colley Williams was the captain.
Oh, it's Holly Wilsey Walker over here. Yeah. I think that shortly after my generation, they really stopped doing the nicknames. It became less and less acceptable because of the way a lot of nicknames were based on, you know, the fact that it might be an attribute or an event or something like that. And it was like became politically incorrect before things got really politically incorrect.
Yeah, that's what I found. Was it seemed like a lot of nicknames were people picking on other people and gave them names they didn't want. And I think a lot of them were that I remember growing up were negative nicknames. So.
But it sounds like it didn't start that way necessarily, or I'm just trying to sort of wrap my brain around, like, you know, you said you were kind of assigned a nickname whether you liked it or not, and sometimes it was for doing kind of something stupid or something silly, but did people embrace it? But then it maybe became something more negative.
I think people weren't as thick-skinned in those days, Lauren. You just sort of rolled with it and didn't take it to heart as much as people seem to today.
So it was always somewhat, some of them were always somewhat negative. I mean, hairy leg so-and-so is probably a negative of that teacher.
But didn't most of them originate in school at pretty low levels, like middle school or high school? It's just, you know, kids teasing other kids or making fun of teachers, or did many of them come from adulthood? I don't think so. I think it's just, you know, like young boys or adolescents, or is that when they mostly originated, or?
That sounds about right. I mean, you know, and that's the gift that we get with our multi-generational town, is that if you get a nickname when you're a kid, you're probably, we're going to know it for your whole life.
And also nicknames are passed on from father to son.
Well, that's interesting. Can you think
Willie, you got to have a few more nicknames, don't you?
Well,
Plumber Cosner,
Secret Woodfin.
Secret.
Secret. He was fire down the transportation, then he went to the fire department. And I got one of my relations was called Snotty Nose Hooper. Don't ask me where that came from.
Snuffy Bethune.
Of course, you had Chippy Humphrey. You people probably remember him, chairman of the finance committee, and he was in superintendent of the sewer department when it was the sewer department.
Hello, can anybody hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh no, first I wanted to say hello to my sister, who I haven't seen in over a year. Hi.
Oh, welcome. Are you joining us from Italy?
Yes, I am.
Okay, welcome.
But this is the first time I've Zoomed. I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know half of any of you remember me. I used to hang out on the bench in the 1960s, 1970s, and everybody had a nickname back then. So I'm just more interested in the benchy stuff.
Where was this bench? I'm new, so can you tell me where that was?
Okay, the bench is next to the old townhouse that was in front of the, going down towards State Street. And we lived there basically. It was our hangout. Jimmy Davenport, Billy Frost, Charlie Mitchell, the Creighton brothers, Chris Snow, Becky Prescott, what was her brother's name? Billy Prescott.
Bill, George.
Which George? Oh, and there was also Pete Moreno, the old cobbler.
George and Bill Prescott, her brothers.
Yeah, well, I'm Becca's age, so, and I used to hang out with her. And the old cobbler, remember Pete Moreno, the Creighton brothers, Gracie Creighton's father? The old cobbler? No, nothing?
Yeah, Pete Mormino.
Yeah, do you remember him? He used to bother all the girls whenever they tried to sit down on the bench. He'd make sure his hand was always under there before he sat down. He was hysterical, and he always smoked those nasty, smelly cigars.
They were stogies, I'm told.
Oh God, I don't know what they were, but they were nasty. Those are most of the memories I have are in the 60s and the 70s. Before then, I was too little, and afterwards, I got dragged to Italy. So all my memories are stuck in that period there.
Those are great. Thank you. So the cobbler, was his shop right there? Is that why he was always at the bench?
No, I think he was retired and probably was senile and just had nothing to do all day. So he said, well, young kids, this is fun. And he would just plop himself down there and sing old Southern Italian love songs to everybody.
He did have his cobbler shop down by the townhouse on Washington Street, and then later his son had the Pete's Sandwich Shop in the same building.
Which was his son? Because I knew his grandkids. I knew David and John.
Peter Mormino ran the sandwich shop. That was his son.
I don't remember him at all. I remember his daughter, Grace.
I went to school with Pete Mormino, and the last time I saw him was in 2010. And then he still owned the building and had tenants in it.
You know what I've been wondering about for a long time, and no one ever seems to mention it, even on the Facebook on the Marblehead site, is does anybody remember Mr. Marcus's antique shop?
Yes, yes, I do. My father went to high school with him in Salem.
And he had that woman that worked with him, Rosie. Does anybody remember Rosie?
Rosie Falloon. Rosie Falloon. I don't know if she worked for Marcus, but she did work at a restaurant on Washington Street.
Well, there was a woman named Rosie, and she wasn't 100%. And she loved me because my mother would hang out at the antique shop and just, roam around for hours and drag me there
That is Rosie Falloon. She had a husband named Harry, and she lived in that building where Pete Mormino had his sandwich shop.
Wow, what a small world.
We had, Rosie was, when my grandfather came to live with us in 1963 or two, there was some money available to hire a maid, and the maid was Rosie Falloon. And yeah, she was not 100%, and she told my mother all sorts of fantastic stories.
Yeah, she was great.
Yeah, and the restaurant that she worked in earlier was Sarah's Restaurant, which was 2 doors towards State Street from Muggsy Harris's soda fountain and telegraph office.
She would babysit for me and tell me the funniest stories, and I could never understand half of what she was talking about. I was about 3 or 4. But I have some great memories of getting lost in that shop because there's just so much junk in there. What does that mean?
Oh, welcome to somebody's just joining us, actually. So welcome. Just to jump back for a second, David, I think you mentioned that nicknames were passed from father to son. Can anybody, not to put the pressure on you, but can you think of anybody for whom that was the case? That we could just have an example?
In my mother's notes for her books, Anchor Float Dixie was passed to a son as well. And I can't think of any other examples, but if you get into
Peanut Powers.
Ooh.
Say that again, Leo?
Police officer and his son Jack picked up Peanut.
Oh.
He was.
Where did that come from?
his relative size compared to other policemen like Woodfin and Chapman.
Oh, he was great. He used to help us cross the street when we got out of school. He rode a motorcycle, right?
Yep.
Yeah, he
Aw,
was
he
a
was great.
motorcycle cop at the time.
Who, Chapman?
Powers. But we had there was 2-3 motorcycle cops, and I think Chapman sounds familiar as being one of them, but I can't really recall that.
Well,
Yeah,
Peanut rode a motorcycle.
Chapman was the other motorcycle cop that I remember.
Yeah, he used to be a youth baseball umpire.
There was one of them lived up on Hillside Avenue way back when, and I was about 4 years old or something like that, and a neighbor of ours was taking us over to Devereaux Beach to go swimming, and coming down the hill on Hillside there or whatever, knocked a motorcycle cop off his bicycle, off of some motorcycle. And I guess he'd been home having a couple of beers for lunch, so he didn't say a damn word about it.
Anyone remember Count Brady, who was a policeman, and his wife Rita and his 2 daughters who went to high school a year behind me?
Yeah, I can remember them. And I can remember Ike Varro. But the motorcycle cops were Jack Percy, Russ Graves, Charlie Woodfin, Peanut Powers. And
Sully.
we had a few others that had problems, but they no longer were allowed to drive the motorcycle.
Mark Trader drove the motorcycle. Carl Parsons, Dave Holman,
Yep,
Jimmy McDonald.
Jimmy McDonald rode it. Yep.
Joe Holman.
Joe Holman.
Joe
Joe
Holman.
Holman was the last of the old school. I know Dean Peralta drives it today. Hey, Bill, do you know how Odie Milmore got Odie?
That was his name, Otis Millmore.
Oh, was it?
That was his name. Married the Graves girl.
Barbara. I worked for Odie many years. I have kind of a unique story. Back when I was preteen, living on Broughton Road, we played like touch football, and we get kind of monotonous. And we had a thing in the midsummer when it's really hot, go over to somebody's porch and draw straws. Who's going to go up and light a fire up in the woods up by in back where the new high school is now? And then of course somebody'd light the fire. We'd ring the box about halfway down Broughton Road. Trucks come. We all grab a broom, go up and help them put it out. And it was a routine thing for fire department back then to do like an annual fire up there. But we always get the brooms and help out. Something to do, you know.
Wow. You never got in trouble?
We used to do the same at Y Pond, and I went up there on a windy day and I lit the match and off the fire went. And I went flying down. I hopped on my bike and scrammed out of there, and I got down to the bottom of the hill and I crossed the street. I pulled up my driveway on Bouvier Road, and out go the fire trucks and running the back door out of breath. And my dad looked at me and he said, "You little turkey." I didn't realize, but I burnt off my eyebrows and I burnt my hair up up on my forehead. And he knew exactly what I just did.
Well, everybody needs a hobby.
Well, that now, you know what? I mean, now the the pond is all overgrown and grown in, and Y Pond's not there anymore. So I think we might have known what we were doing, but we certainly didn't act like it.
Yeah, everything's all bike trails now.
I understand that Y Pond would be spelled W-Y-E, referring to the railroad Y that was in place to turn trains around. Is that correct, folks?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It was Koi Pond, was way out, almost into Salem. But that was back in the 1700s also. But Jackie, you live on Usher Swamp, and that used to burn routinely every April. And the firemen would go nuts over there because it was really getting along, probably to catch those cottages that used to be over there on Usher's Beach.
Oh my gosh, before they straightened it out over there, that place was
Now,
12 feet high with
well, it's all sophisticated now. It's called Goldthwait Reservation, of course.
yeah.
Speaking of Goldthwait, as some of you may have known, my mother was in Alcoholics Anonymous, and one of her buddies was a guy named Ted Sweeney, who had a long history of drinking in Marblehead, and he had been in the Civilian Conservation Corps when they dug out the marshes and put the channels in for Goldthwait Reservation. Before that, it was a very messy swamp.
Right across from Twig Burke's house, speaking of nicknames.
That's right. That's a modern day nickname, huh? Does anybody know how he got that nickname? We allowed to ask?
I know he's had it for a long time.
Go back a couple of years. How about Winker Chapman and Tinker Carroll? Couple of old timers. One's worked down the boatyard, one was the town accountant.
Does anyone remember a couple of guys who had drinking problems named Gas House and Goldtooth?
Yeah,
Cooper Cutler told me that they were brothers, the Harney brothers.
yeah, it's correct.
Okay, good.
Gas House spent the night in my garage where I'm living now. One night, my father came out to get in his car, and there's Gas House in the back seat. But that only happened once.
I had Bomber Martin. It was Tommy Martin. Doozer McHugh. It was Sean McHugh.
Anyone else have nicknames or funny stories about how they got their nicknames, or not so funny stories?
We had, you mentioned already Spitfire Henderson. We also had a battling Barb Hingston. Allegedly, she was a retired wrestler, female.
What was that?
But,
I had
Smoo Remick. Remember the Smoos in the Little Abner comic strip?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had him, and I had, what was Hingston's nickname again?
We called her Battling Barb, but I'm sure she probably went through others.
Remick was a basketball coach for a long time and the backfield coach.
His father was a chemistry teacher, and it was claimed that the father had a still in the room behind his chemistry lab, and he became ill for some reason, the father, and they brought in a substitute who was a woman possibly in her 40s and 50s, a very short woman, and she, I don't remember her name exactly, but she had worked in a chemical factory during the war, which of course was quite recent then. And she warned us from the very start never to put solid sodium in water. And of course, someone did. We had a chemistry lab and there was a trough that ran between the sides of the benches, and someone dumped a sugar cube sized piece of solid sodium into it, and it sputtered and flashed. In one motion, she jumped up on the bench and screamed. So that was, I forget her name. I don't know if anyone else witnessed that, but that did happen.
Many troublemakers.
Sorry. It's my fault. Sorry.
The list from 1929 is pretty good. Eagle beak, clam belly, dump barrel, zero. We had Chucko and Juggo down at the store, down at Osborne's.
Are you
Some of
looking
them I
at
can't
those?
say.
Blue jay.
What's that, Leo?
I got a blue jay. Ah, he just left.
Jack, are you reading the list that David posted, the link?
Oh, I don't know. I've had, it's probably the same one from March 8th, 1929 from the Messenger.
Yeah, that's it. I don't know if they ever printed the actual names or if anyone ever won that contest, but it would be interesting to see what the actual surnames were. If anyone has a list in printed or even handwritten form, you can contact me through the website and mail it or email it to me, and I will type it up and I'll add it to my list on the website. I've got 3 lists there now, so I'll be happy to do that, to pull some of this together.
This was pretty good. A prize of $10 will be given to the person who first brings in the list of nicknames filled out with the correct surnames to the messenger office. There's got to be a couple hundred of them.
610, Jack.
I mean, you gotta know your Marblehead nicknames if you're gonna complete the list for $10. That's for sure.
Do you know if they published the winners of the list after that?
I couldn't find it, and I did this years ago at the library with the microfilm.
Oh.
It's funny, in the same paper they talk about children learn the history of Marblehead. Study of local geography taken up in 3rd grade. Which is something that I think we should probably push today.
Did we ever study the history of Marblehead?
Imagine that. I know we did when we were, I think it was 8th grade and third or 4th grade.
Yeah, Madeline Orn taught it to us in the Gary School in the 3rd grade.
I'm glad you said that because Madeline was the only person that I ever heard give any honest history of Marblehead, and it was not in her curriculum. She said she wasn't supposed to do it, and we'd get it later, and we never, ever got it. That's a great big, extremely big void vacuum in my education in Marblehead.
Yeah, Roger Tuvison, Chris Nash, and Jerry Orland did a great. It always ended the year, and we ended up with doing the last part of it was sort of hands-on. It was a walking tour around town, which had a bunch of questions built into it, and it was. I'm pretty sure it's still going today because, 25, 30 years later, I'd be downtown and you'd see the kids walking around with their notebooks and they looking at the same.
I'm glad you said that.
Architectural features that we were looking at in 8th grade.
Said Chris Nash? He was my history teacher in junior high.
Yep.
And I don't remember him teaching us. I remember suffering through the Civil War. Is he still in Marblehead?
I believe he is. I think he's still on Devereux Street.
Huh.
I know Jerry and Roger are as well. Well, I had the three of them together, and we were in the auditorium at the old junior high.
Coffin School used to have I'm not sure which grade it was, but they had Marblehead. I remember a couple of projects that when our girls went there, so 20 years ago, they were doing Marblehead, the street.
Groovy
You never
Tooby.
did any?
I had the, some people you didn't really tell their nickname to all that much, and I tossed that one out on Facebook a year or so ago to Roger, and he got a kick out of it, I think.
He was my homeroom teacher in 9th grade in 1967. We listened to the World Series when the Red Sox were playing the Cardinals.
He wouldn't miss a good baseball game, that's for sure.
No.
And Trick Evans was our assistant principal.
Mr. Evans.
Yeah.
I had him for homeroom. Oh boy. Is he still around?
I don't think so.
Oh dear. I'm gonna stop asking questions. I don't think I want to know. I haven't been to Marblehead. I haven't been back in like 40 years. So all the things I remember are things that probably no one else would. I don't want to look at me. You.
All right. Well, this was fun. Anybody have anything else to add?
Yeah, we haven't mentioned Buster Dixie yet. I went to school with his son, Philip. Buster was a foreman at one of the boatyards in Little Harbor, not Graves.
What was his real name? Ed? Was that Ed? Buster?
Oh, can't hear you, David.
I don't know what Buster's real name was. I remember he was a foreman at the Ted. I've forgotten Ted's last name. He was the Ted Hood's boatyard where I worked for a summer as a painter.
Monk Mace, he worked at Graves's lower yard.
What was his name again, Bill?
Monk Mace.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's related to Puck Mace. She was the famous crossing guard there.
Okay.
Still going strong.
Mm-hmm.
Lauren, I don't know if it's already part of the archives somewhere, but it seems like every guy I knew in school growing up worked for one of the boatyards or another in some capacity or another. And I don't know if that's worth doing a segment on or looking into, but you hear it. It's kind of a common theme that keeps coming up. And I'm sure most of the guys here all have memories of that. And I have memories of visiting them all the time and, maybe helping out a little. I was allowed to, sand something but that played a pretty important part, I think, in Marblehead for most kids growing up, the boatyard.
Yeah, and in the sail company too. What was the name of the big sail company?
Ted Hood, they just mentioned it. Ted Hood?
Hood Sail, yeah. People worked there or they worked in the boatyards. All the boys did growing up. What was the name? I remember that there was a fisherman who had long blonde hair and he had a really Biff. Does anybody remember Biff?
Biff Martin, yeah, I remember him.
Okay, that's another name. That's the only name I can remember. Other that and Chummy Frost and Daffy.
What was the last name? Biff who?
Biff Martin.
Martin. I was thinking Michaud, but that's not right. Biff.
It was Martin, Biff Martin. I know that for sure. He sold lobsters on Ferryway.
You can find him at Red's Pond sailing the model sailboats a couple of times a week.
With Cliffy the Whiffy?
No, people avoid Cliffy the Whiffy.
Yeah, I noticed too.
I'll say no more. This is being recorded.
I I know that they both. I know that he hangs out at Red's Pond. That's why I mentioned it.
No, I think, Susan, that is a great idea to do something just on the boatyards and sail loft. I think that's or the sail making company.
Well, what was
Definitely.
the, Lauren, the meeting you had a few months ago, there was some good discussions about about that. Is that one recorded? Is that
That
available
is
someplace?
recorded. Yeah, it's available on our YouTube page. So you can access that just by going to YouTube and searching Marblehead Museum. You can also go to our website, and under the research and collections, there's a link to the YouTube page. Yeah, we did a segment, was it on the fishing industry on shore? And so there was a little bit, but I wonder if we get some new people. Oh yeah, back in April. Thank you, Amy. But maybe we'll get some new people now that we have, that was only our, second or third meeting. We have some more, some new people on now too. So
Yeah.
that's great. Do that again. Great. Well, thank you all for joining us this morning, and I hope you'll join us again next month. I think it's November 7th or so. The first Saturday of the month, 10 a.m. The Zoom, you can register online. We'll have the Zoom link sent to you, and then a couple days before we put the Zoom link online. That's just to avoid spammers. Not spammers, what is it called? The people that jump in and do bad things. So thank you all for joining us. If anybody does have lists that they're willing to share for us to put in our Marblehead Memories archive, we'd certainly appreciate it, even if it's just a copy of a handwritten list.
I can scan. I have Louise Martin Cutler gave me several pages all typed up years ago, and I can dig that out and scan it and send it to you.
That'd be amazing. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us. Have a great day, and I'll see you on Thursday's lecture.
Did you get the picture of the bench?
The bench?
Yeah, last month you were talking about the bench.
Yeah, we should do a session on the bench, you think?
No, I said I had a picture of it, and I tried to upload it to you. I don't know if you got it or not.
No, we did not receive that. If you could possibly email it to info@marbleheadmuseum.org, that would be great.
Okay, we'll put that on the info@marbleheadmuseum.org.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
I
Danny,
think someone should varnish the bench.
Danny,
Yeah.
you had your interview with Daffy on the bench, right?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yep, saw that. But
Are they going to put a plaque on the bench?
the cartoon that I
Ever?
put was a memory of 1932.
Wonderful.
They should gold plate the bench.
You
Yeah.
should at least varnish. At least varnish it. It'd probably get full of splinters if you sat on it now.
I took a picture of my old hippie sister about 5 years ago sitting on the bench, and it got quite a few comments and remarks on it. It's one of my favorite pictures of her. What was I asked her what was in the she had a paper bag. Ironically, she had a paper bag with her, and was it wine that was in the old it was like a ceramic bottle.
Yeah, we put Valentine Ale in a
Lancers.
Special spot, that's for sure.
Is it worth doing a whole session on the bench, or is that a bit much? Or is there enough stories to talk for 45 minutes about a bench? Or the people at the bench? What do you
I don't
think?
know. I think a lot of the memories of the bench might have been forgotten.
I could probably write a book about the bench, but I don't
There you
dare. I'm not going on. There are a lot of things I could say. I would have to have other people though. Bill Frost, Jimmy would have to be there. Becca, but she lives in Salem now. And I don't know who else is around anymore. As I said, I haven't been there in 40 years. I had some great memories though.
Well, have a good day, everybody.
Take care.
See
You
Thank
too. Take care.